I used to work overnight shifts at a small gas station convenience store in upstate New York. It wasn't exactly a glamorous job, but it paid better than my last one, and I figured a quiet shift at night would mean less stress. Most nights were dead. Maybe 2 or 3 customers would wander in between midnight and 4 in the morning. A few truckers looking for coffee, the occasional drunk looking for snacks. Nothing I couldn't handle. But one night in December, a man came in who I'll never forget. It was around 2:30 a.m. I was behind the counter scrolling through my phone when the door chimed. A tall guy walked in wearing a heavy parka zipped all the way up, hood pulled over his head. At first, I thought he was just trying to stay warm. It was freezing outside. But something about him immediately put me on edge. He didn't speak, didn't even glance at me. He just started walking slowly through the aisles, dragging his boots along the tile like each step was deliberate. At first, I brushed it off. Some people just like to browse. But he wasn't browsing. He wasn't picking anything up or even looking at the shelves. He just kept pacing, back and forth, down one aisle and up the next, like he was waiting for something. After about 10 minutes, I called out to him. "Hey man, you good? Need help finding something?" He stopped. He turned his head very slowly and looked straight at me. His eyes were wide open, unblinking. He stared at me for what felt like forever, then turned back and walked toward the coffee station. That corner of the store was dimly lit, but I could see him standing perfectly still in front of the empty coffee pots. He didn't pour a cup, he didn't move at all, he just stood there with his back to me. 10 minutes went by, then 20. He was still standing in the same position, not touching a thing. At this point, my skin was crawling. I grabbed the store phone and quietly called my manager. I whispered that some guy had been inside for half an hour without saying a word. She told me to stay behind the counter, lock the doors if I had to, and call the police if he got aggressive. When I hung up, I realized the man was no longer at the coffee station. He was standing right at the counter. I jumped so hard I nearly dropped the phone. He hadn't made a single sound walking up. He leaned in close enough that I could smell his breath, and whispered in this raspy, dry voice, "You shouldn't be here at night." Then, just like that, he turned around and walked out the door. I ran out after him, but the parking lot was empty. The snow outside was fresh and there were no footprints, none at all. I quit 2 weeks later. Last winter, I was working a night shift at a convenience store off the highway. It wasn't the kind of place people usually stopped unless they were desperate. Just a lonely little shop with fluorescent lights and a few gas pumps. We closed the main doors at 1 a.m. and after that, only the drive-through window stayed open for late-night customers. It was a routine shift: stock some shelves, sweep the floor, maybe get a trucker wanting cigarettes. But around 2:45 that night, I noticed something strange. I was restocking bags of chips when I caught sight of a shadow on the glass door. At first, I thought it was my reflection, but then I realized it wasn't moving when I did. It looked like a man standing just outside. I froze. The doors were locked, so no one should have been able to get in, but the outline was there, broad shoulders, a head tilted slightly forward, facing me. I walked up to the counter to get a closer look. The figure stayed. No details, no features, just a faint, dark silhouette pressed against the glass. I leaned forward, trying to convince myself it was just a trick of the light. That's when the glass fogged up, like someone had exhaled a heavy breath against it from the other side. And then a single word appeared, drawn into the condensation by an invisible finger. Open. My whole body locked up. I scrambled for the phone behind the counter, dialing the police with shaking hands. But when I looked back, the fog had cleared. The silhouette was gone. When morning finally came, I pulled up the security camera footage. I needed proof, something to convince myself it wasn't just exhaustion messing with me. But the footage made everything worse. On the screen, I could see myself walking up to the glass door, I could see my lips moving like I was talking to someone, but there was no one there. Just me. This is the story that convinced me to never, ever take another overnight shift again. It was about 4 in the morning and the store was dead silent. No customers, no cars outside, not even the hum of the cooler seemed loud enough to keep me awake. I was sitting at the counter, chin propped on my hand, when the emergency radio behind me crackled to life. We kept it for weather alerts, but it hadn't worked in years. Usually it was just dead static. But that night, the static cleared and a voice came through. A child's voice. It was soft, almost playful, like a kid singing a nursery rhyme. But what it was saying made my stomach drop. It was my name, over and over, whispered, sung, stretched into a chant. My name, come outside. I froze. Nobody knew I was working that night except my boss, and this voice definitely wasn't hers. I muted the radio, but 5 seconds later it turned itself back on. This time the voice was urgent. Come outside, please, it's waiting. And right as those words ended, the automatic sliding doors at the front of the store opened on their own. They stayed open, letting in the freezing night air, even though there was nobody there. I sat behind that counter with my eyes locked on the doors until sunrise. I didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even breathe properly. When my manager came in, I told him everything. The radio, the voice, the doors. He frowned and shook his head. That's not possible, he said. The power was out here last night. We didn't have electricity for the radio or the doors.